Hey, church family, it's James here. We continue to work our way through the Psalms, day 17, Psalm 17. I'm going to ask you to read it when this short video is over. And as you do so, pay attention to how it teaches us to trust God in difficult circumstances. See, on one hand, we don't want to make the mistake in uncertain times of having this kind of blithe attitude of, oh, you should just trust God. Just trust God and everything will be fine, as if we can just somehow magically turn our own anxieties and fears into a deep trust in God. We don't want to make that mistake. At the same time, we don't want to make the opposite mistake of thinking that there's nothing we can do to foster a greater trust in God. The Psalms are full of teachings that would help us bring our emotional lives into greater consistency with our faith beliefs, teaching us how our theology can actually not just be something that lives in our head, but now dwells in our hearts. And as David finds himself in a challenging situation, we see him doing things that foster trust in times of uncertainty. Let me give you just a couple examples to look out for as you read your way through it. First of all, notice how David, in this time of trial that he is enduring, seeks comfort and rest in God's presence. He brings these challenging circumstances and he places them in God's hands. He fosters trust by placing matters in God's hands. Notice also, though, how as he does so, he is confident that God will hear him. He says he has called upon God and that God, look at these words, will answer me, O God. Incline your ear to me and hear my words. He is confident that as he places matters in God's hands, trust can be fostered because God will hear him. Note also then, thirdly, how quick David is to remind himself or build trust by reminding himself of who God is. He reminds himself of God's wondrous love. He asks that God would keep him as the apple of his eye. Do you know that phrase comes from the Bible? That God would continue to pour his love out upon David and continue to care for him as the covenant-keeping God, that David would find protection in this love, protection in the shadow of God's wings. He fosters trust by grounding himself in God's love, something we can do all the more in the gospel of Jesus Christ. Then lastly, we could jump to the end of the psalm. Note how David fosters trust by finding rest and satisfaction in God. The reality is David never looks to his own circumstances for hope, for satisfaction. He always looks to God. And as he does these things, placing matters in God's hands, being confident that God hears him, grounding himself in God's love, finding satisfaction in God alone, his rest and trust in God increase. And he finds himself able to navigate the trials and oppositions that he's facing in this time. So as we find ourselves in some difficult, trying circumstances, especially these next few weeks, we take the time to ground ourselves in our God, not thinking that we can blithely just magically have our anxieties disappear by just trusting in God, but by taking the time to build up these disciplines, fostering greater trust in God, who is certainly worthy of it. Psalm 17. Here's my favorite verse from the psalm. Keep me as the apple of your eye. Hide me in the shadow of your wings.